So, my life is pretty ordinary. I work, I serve, I study, and repeat. And my life has always been this way, ordinary. I was born and raised to a Christian family, a nuclear family at that, by the grace of God. So I don't have a wild backstory. I don't have a story at all. I don't have a past of partying or drinking or witchcraft. I don't have a crazy story of how I almost died and God saved my life. Well,
this is the best way because there's no pain. You won't feel anything. You go to sleep and that's just it. Like, I just kept hearing that and I guess I just kept staring at them and I just wanted to go so bad. Like, I just didn't want to be there anymore.
But other than that, I've always been here. I've always known Jesus. And sure, okay, maybe my testimony won't get clicks and millions of views. It might get 2 at most. But let me tell you why it still matters, and why your boring testimony matters too.
Alright, we've all done it. Maybe you're rolling down the testimony rabbit hole and you're just clicking one after another. And you're not just clicking on anything, you know? You're strategic. You're clicking on the exciting ones. The ones that are like, I almost died. The ones that are, I'm an ex-witch and now I'm for Jesus. You know, the ones where I visited hell at least 8 times and God finally grabbed me. You're clicking on those. And hey, we're all guilty of this. I've done it as well. I think I used to joke a lot about how my testimony was boring or how my testimony would be the testimony that never gets clicks. Not in a way of like, oh, I'm only sharing my testimony in hopes of some sort of gratification. My testimony is not a testimony where people are itching to find out what happens next. I mean, you can pretty much figure out my testimony from its title alone. And I think we all have a habit of doing this where you might see 3 people give their testimony and you were about to give yours, but theirs were just so much more exciting. I think we fall into this habit of almost comparing our testimonies because we assume that your testimony has to be entertaining to then want to share it, which actually leads me into my first point. We don't share our testimonies with people as an opportunity to share a good story. You share your testimony with people because A, it is how you show gratitude to the Lord, B, it's how you remind yourself of what He's done, and C is to encourage other people that if He's done it for you, He can also do it for them. One thing the enemy really loves to do is to fill people with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. Let's just use the example of addiction. Let's say you were addicted to something and God has set you free from it. Obviously, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame that can come with that. And the enemy's goal is to keep you there. But there is such freedom in sharing it anyway. One, for yourself. There is such freedom in sharing that anyway. Because now you can confidently tell yourself that it's not something to be ashamed of, especially since that's your past. Why are we ashamed of who we once were when you're not that anymore? And then second, this sets the other person free because maybe there is somebody who also is dealing with addiction and they cannot see how they're going to get out of it. You have now encouraged that person to see that because I got out of it with the help of God, so can you. And that person can be a believer or not a believer. And you even being bold enough to stand up and share that publicly with people also lets the person know that this isn't something to be ashamed of. Allowing God to help you and free you from addictions and different things like that is not something to be ashamed of, but it's something to be proud of because it's no longer who you are. So maybe you are somebody like me who always felt like your story or your testimony isn't really that impactful or it's not as entertaining to share. I hope this really helps you gain some insight and understanding as to why we share our testimony to begin with. And with that being said, my testimony, and if you relate to me, then this is probably your testimony too. Our testimony is that we remained. This is kind of where I really wanted to sit and really land with this video. And I think this is the most important. I've really been stressing the importance of sharing your testimony, of why it matters, but I really want to explain why your specific testimony matters. The people who don't have the testimonies where it's like, I was once a witch and now I'm saved, or the people who have the testimonies of my life consisted of partying and drinking, but the Lord saved me, now I'm doing ministry. Like, for the people who don't have that testimony, for the people who have always been in the faith, for the people who have grown up in the Christian family households and didn't give in to peer pressure, didn't try new things, didn't really do anything dumb that would teach them a lesson in life. For those people, I really want to take this time to explain to you why your testimony, even if you don't even think it is a testimony, why your story of you remaining is still so important and something you should be grateful to have. So I think we're all familiar with Proverbs 22 verse 6. That's the verse that says to train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Or in another translation, dedicate your children to God and point them in the way that they should go, and the values they've learned from you will be with them for life. I do believe this to be true. I do think there are a lot of people who can be raised in the faith, maybe leave, and I do believe that they can return. I believe a lot of them do return, no matter where that is in their life. And then for some of us, there are the children who were trained up, that were raised, and we stayed. I see this going in two directions. I think sometimes I have a habit of thinking I have no exciting testimony to share because I haven't gone through anything, because I've always been here. But then there are other times where I'm too almost ashamed to share my testimony or my story, how I've always been here, because I don't want it to come across as bragging. I don't want it to seem like I think I'm better than the other person because, oh, I never experienced that. But I think that is also a tactic of the enemy. Shame does not only creep up when it's something that you've done that is bad. Shame creeps up anytime you feel like you are bad. The enemy would use that a lot on me to make me think that I shouldn't share my testimony or how I grew up because it's going to make other people feel bad, which is still a lie. I really want us to focus on the prodigal son story. If you're not familiar, that can be found in Luke 15 verses 11 to 32. There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." That is very younger child syndrome, I'm not gonna lie. But the youngest son wasn't necessarily being wise. He wanted his share to be given to him prematurely. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had. He took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. So now that he had the money, now that he had the share, he wasted it. He didn't use it wisely. He spent it on whatever and whenever he could. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country and he began to be in need. And so very quickly he ran out of the money that he had. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. This man had hit such rock bottom that he wanted to eat what the pigs were eating. Imagine having everything and exchanging that for hunger, for starvation, and honestly humiliation, simply for a taste of excitement, for a taste of fun. And when he came to himself, in other translations, it says when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." He's ultimately made the decision to go back to his father, but he's fearful of what that would be. He's fearful of what he'll even say. And what is he filled with? He's filled with a lot of shame. He's filled with a lot of guilt. He's learned from his mistake. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the fields, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, "Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and now found." I think the verse that we, the children who have always been there, the older sibling that has always been working and serving, I think we need to be reminded of verse 31. And he said to him, "Son," or maybe for you, "daughter, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." The testimony you have is that you have always been with God. Your testimony is that all that he has is yours, and it always has been. Imagine being ashamed that you had always dwelt with God. Imagine being ashamed or finding it boring that the story you get to share with people is that you have always been with the Lord. It's not boring at all, and it's also not something we should take so lightly. Life has necessary and unnecessary hardships. I think unnecessary hardships are situations you could have avoided but you got yourself into out of foolishness. And then I think there are necessary hardships that life just unfortunately will come with. In this case, the younger son dealt with unnecessary hardships. He didn't have to take his inheritance. He didn't have to leave as soon as he did. He didn't have to blow all his money and then have to come begging and crying back to his father. Unfortunately, that happened because of a decision he decided to make. The older son's hardest hardship was that maybe his father never threw him a party. I think it's important. You need to really understand that no one is boasting about the pain, about the hardships they had to go through. People are sharing their testimonies because of the goodness of God. No one is sharing their testimony and going, I am so happy and I just want to boast about the fact that I was a witch. No, the testimony is, I once was in darkness, but now I'm in light because God saved me. Listen to the testimonies you're hearing and then think of yours. Your testimony isn't less than. Do you know how many people wish they had your testimony? You know how many people wish they had the testimony of, oh, I grew up in the faith. I was always with the Lord. I was always walking with him. Oh, I always experienced the peace and the joy of God. And this isn't me trying to belittle your experiences, because I'm sure you also went through hardship even while being in the faith. But there are so many unnecessary hardships you got to avoid because you remained with God. And yet we belittle that. And yet we call that testimony boring. And yet we don't want to share that testimony because what can people get out of it? And so if you are watching this and you have a similar story, bless the Lord because you remained. There are a lot of people who grow up in the faith who don't stay. There are a lot of people who have always known the Lord and known of the Lord, but they have not sought him, they have not gotten closer to him, they have not remained. So your testimony is valuable and your testimony is beautiful. Finally, all I'm really saying is that your testimony is not your story. It wasn't written by you. It wasn't even written for you. It was written to point back to God's goodness and his glory. And so I don't know about you, but I'm not telling the author of my life that his storytelling is boring. I'm not telling him that it's bad. Okay, so maybe your testimony will never be adapted into a movie and possibly critically acclaimed. It probably won't. In fact, a lot of people's testimonies won't. And so let's just remember that everything that God creates is good. And so even if you find that it is boring or it's not as enticing as maybe another testimony is online, if God said it is good, then it is.